Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Shawna Khalafi. We want to continue our coverage of that shooting in Washington, D.C. this week. Two National Guard members shot. One of them has passed away from her injuries. The other one still in the hospital. We have this tweet from the Washington Post. They say National Guard troops patrolling in D.C. will be paired with local law enforcement personnel in the wake of the attack that killed one troop and critically injured another. That's according to D.C. police officials. We want to bring in Washington Post reporter Olivia George. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
So what are you hearing exactly about this plan, and how would this work? Would local law enforcement be patrolling alongside the National Guard?
So my colleagues and I reported earlier today on an email that was sent to DC police leadership Wednesday afternoon, detailing that local law enforcement would be conducted high visibility patrols with the National Guard in DC. It appears that that partnered system was in effect yesterday and today. My colleagues and I are told that the planning and the situation remains fluid, so it's unclear how long that kind of partnership will be in effect for, but it definitely marks quite a change in how the National Guard has been patrolling in DC. Up until this point, they've been largely unaccompanied by local law enforcement.
So this would be something new for the city. And of course, following Wednesday's attack, there may be some safety concerns from law enforcement, from National Guard members, also from the community there. What are you hearing about those concerns? And do you think that this kind of partnership could help ease some of those?
So we've been reporting how officials have acknowledged the potential safety concerns really from the inception of this deployment mission in DC. For a while now, National Guard have been advised to be using the buddy system. We reviewed internal records that detailed advice to troops that they should be changing out of their official uniform when they're not on duty and when they're not in that kind of official lodgings. We also know that, well before the terrible attack on Wednesday back in the summer, members of the National Guard had been in conversation with the local police department to increase patrols by local police officers around the hotels and places where troop members were staying, because they were reportedly, being harassed and were worried about safety concerns.
Yeah, and them working together, of course, the local police with the National Guard would be something new. So what would that mean for the relationship between these two entities?
You're right. It is quite a substantial shift. At the moment, Trump administration officials and others have really praised the troops' presence in the city, in part because by them being stationed around metro stations and the monuments, etc., they've kind of been able to free up local law enforcement to turn their attention elsewhere. This would change that, because local police would, in some circumstances, be diverted towards accompanying National Guard members. While the situation remains fluid, both federal and local officials, continue to emphasize that they have a long history of working together, though, the deployment of the National Guard in the city is obviously continues to be somewhat atypical.
And you did talk about this a little bit, but is this something that would be a temporary arrangement? Could this be implemented long term, this sort of partnership between local officers and the National Guard in DC?
So at the moment, we're continually reminded that the situation is fluid when it comes to how long-term this kind of relationship or patrolling partnership could extend for. Like I said, we understand that it was in effect today and yesterday, and talks continue between not just the DC Police Department and the National Guard, but also federal law enforcement partners, like the US Park Police, for example. And I'll note too that the National Guard's presence in DC continues to be the subject of ongoing litigation. So, we're also following those legal developments very closely, because they could determine how long the National Guard could continue to be in DC for.
That's a good point because even before this shooting on Wednesday, there was already concerns from local leaders, community members in cities across the country, including Washington, D.C., about even having the National Guard's presence there. So do you think that local law enforcement working more alongside the National Guard could change those perceptions, or do you anticipate any pushback from the community members or local leaders on this?
Well, we know that when the DC Attorney General sued the Trump administration back in September over the deployment of the National Guard, the lawsuit pointed to concerns that the very presence of the National Guard in the city could increase, the potential for violent interactions between the public and the National Guard and law enforcement. Trump administration attorneys in court, dismissed that as totally speculative. But we continue to see the National Guard's presence in DC as a point of contention between federal lawmakers and everyday people that live here. Having said that, the mayor and her team have continued to express that they wish that the National Guard was not present in the city, but at the same time, they have acknowledged that the surge of federal law enforcement in DC, has been a welcome boost of personnel power to help reduce crime rates.
Okay, and last question here. This is still very fresh. Yesterday, we just learned that one of the National Guard members did pass away from that shooting on Wednesday. What is the overall atmosphere like in the city? What have you been seeing? Is there, we've seen a lot of condolences, of course, coming in, but what is the feeling like in DC itself this week?
I think that there's, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of anguish, especially at a time of year that is meant to be, for many people, a very special time, that you share with loved ones and give thanks for all that you are grateful for. I think a lot of people in the city feel on edge because Wednesday was just such an atrocious attack. And it comes at a time when there is already kind of mounting tensions between leaders and residents, leaders at the federal level, leaders at the local level, that it just, there are a lot of very strong emotions. At a time when most people are hoping that they're able to be joyful and praiseful. It was just an especially devastating moment on Wednesday.
Yeah, definitely a sad development in this story. We will continue to follow any developments that come out. Again, 2 National Guard members shot on Wednesday. One of them has passed away, and now possibly plans for the National Guard troops to patrol alongside local law enforcement. Thank you so much, Olivia, for joining us. Olivia George with the Washington Post with that info. Thank you.
Thanks.